A hush fell over the diner the moment they told him to leave, a silence so deep it shattered every expectation of anger or outburst. Instead of lashing out, he simply stood there, calm and measured, and that quiet defiance sent shockwaves through every heart in that modest establishment. He'd driven in after a grueling day of backroom meetings and endless handshakes, a day that left him drained, longing for nothing more than a simple, unpretentious meal. The diner, a relic of a bygone era with its flickering neon sign and aroma of sizzling burgers and freshly brewed coffee, had been recommended by a local who swore by its legendary meatloaf and hand-cut fries. It was the kind of place that carried decades of memories in every faded photograph on its walls and in every scratch on its time-worn counter. As he stepped through the door, the familiar jingle of the bell mingled with murmurs of recognition and something else. A barely perceptible pause in the smiles of regulars. For one fleeting second, the welcoming warmth of the diner faltered as the hostess's smile stuttered into uncertainty. In that brief moment, every eye in the room narrowed just a fraction, as if silently questioning why someone like him was here tonight. "Good evening," she greeted, her tone careful yet cool. "Will you be dining in or taking out?" He managed a small, tired smile. "Dining in, if that's all right." But the response that followed was anything but routine. After a pause that stretched longer than it should have, she glanced over her shoulder and murmured, "I need to check something real quick." With that, she slipped away through a side door, leaving him amidst a growing undercurrent of whispers and shifting gazes. Moments later, a voice emerged from the kitchen, a voice heavy with a resolve that spoke of both duty and personal conviction. "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't serve you tonight." The words fell like a gavel in a silent courtroom. There was no elaborate explanation, no mention of policy or closing time. It was simply a decision, firm and final, that rippled through the room like a tidal wave of discontent. He scanned the room, saw the skepticism in the eyes of an older man in a well-worn work jacket, the barely concealed satisfaction of a younger patron who'd been waiting for a chance to see him rebuke authority. Yet, despite the charged atmosphere, he chose neither to lash out nor retreat. Instead, he took a measured breath and said, "May I speak with the manager?" His request cut through the tension like a clarion call. The hostess reappeared briefly, hesitating before leading him to a burly man behind the counter, a man whose grease-stained apron and weathered face bore the marks of decades spent serving a community that was as stubborn as it was proud. Without so much as a greeting, the manager's gaze swept over him, and in a tone that was more a challenge than a welcome, he said, "I hear you have a question." His reply was calm and direct. "Why won't you serve me?" The question was simple, but its implications were vast. A challenge to the invisible walls built by years of unkept promises and growing mistrust. The manager exhaled sharply, as if he'd been expecting this very moment, and for a long, tense beat, the only sound was the soft clatter of cutlery and the distant hum of the grill. "This isn't about policy or closing up early," the manager finally said, his voice low and conflicted. "It's about keeping the peace in a community that's been burned too many times by empty promises. People here, they have opinions about you, about what you stand for. They remember every handshake, every promise made and then broken." A murmur ran through the room. An older regular, his hands calloused from decades of honest work, set down his fork with a quiet thud. Across the counter, a young man who had been smirking now leaned forward, his arms folded defensively, as if the very air had shifted. Yet the man before them, known to many simply as JD, remained unflappable. "I get it," he said softly. "But I'm not here just as a label or a headline. I'm here as a man who's listened, who's felt that sting of abandonment, and who believes that maybe, just maybe, we can start rebuilding trust by talking things out." A heavy silence followed, as the manager's stern expression wavered, and for the first time, the eyes of the entire diner seemed to soften ever so slightly. "I run this diner because it's more than just a business," the manager admitted, his voice laden with years of hard-earned wisdom. "It's a haven built on memories, on the hope that every handshake meant something. But these days, It feels like promises are as empty as the coffee cups left behind at the end of the day. The harsh realities of the past. But tonight, let's try something different. Stay. Finish this conversation with me. And if by the end I believe you're more than just a talking head, then maybe I'll have someone bring you a menu. A murmur of astonishment rippled through the gathered crowd. With a small, wry smile, JD accepted the unspoken challenge. Deal, he said simply, the word carrying with it an unspoken promise of dialogue rather than division. In that instant, the atmosphere transformed. What had begun as a standoff rooted in suspicion and resentment was evolving into a shared conversation, a chance for understanding to bridge the gap between a weary community and the man they so eagerly judged. The tension in the room eased, replaced by the tentative hum of renewed possibility. Over the next long, unhurried minutes, the two men, representing the weight of collective memory and the spark of new beginnings, exchanged words that resonated with both regret and hope. I've been called many names, JD admitted quietly, and I know that to many, my promises have become nothing more than empty words. But I stand here not to defend myself, but to listen, to learn what it is you truly need. The manager's gaze wavered, his earlier defiance softening into reluctant curiosity. We've all seen what happens when leaders forget the simple truth, that a handshake means more than a headline. I worked 35 long years in a factory. I've watched families scatter when jobs disappeared overnight. And every time someone came around promising change, we were left holding on to hope that never quite materialized. An older regular, who had been silent until now, spoke up with a voice that trembled with both sorrow and resolve. It's a damn shame when a man can't even get a decent meal because of who he's expected to be, he said, the words carrying the weight of decades of unspoken grievances. At that, the diner's silence broke into a murmur of agreement, a collective acknowledgement that the wounds of the past were deep, yet the possibility for healing lay in the courage to converse honestly. The manager, now seated across from JD, leaned forward. You're the only one who stayed to truly listen, and that means something more than you know. The simple act of sharing a meal, of breaking bread in a place where memories ran as deep as the scars of disappointment, became a turning point. The kitchen staff, as if stirred by this fragile new hope, rallied with a burst of energy. All right, everyone, let's fire up the grill, came the spirited call, a signal that the day's routine was returning, yet now imbued with the promise of change. Within moments, a steaming plate was set down, a classic cheeseburger paired with a generous serving of hand-cut fries. The aroma was familiar and comforting, a reminder that some things remained constant even as conversations shifted the very fabric of a community. JD picked up the burger, took a slow, thoughtful bite, and for a moment, the entire diner held its breath as if waiting for his verdict. A small, approving chuckle escaped the manager, a sound that bridged the gap between skepticism and tentative acceptance. You're something else, he remarked, half in disbelief, half in admiration. Most people in your position would have stormed out, made a scene, or turned this into a headline. But you stayed. JD's smile was quiet, resolute. I believe that to truly understand our future, we must confront our past, listen to every story, every regret, every hope. I'm not here to change everyone's mind in one night. I'm here to start a conversation that might one day rebuild the trust that's been lost. As the night deepened, the diner transformed from a battleground of old resentments into a sanctuary of shared reflection. Conversations resumed, tentative at first, then growing in volume and depth as people began to see each other not as adversaries, but as fellow travelers on the road to redemption. And as he finished his meal, a final, heartfelt truth resonated through his words. I'm not here to win approval from everyone, but I'm here to honor the promise I made, to listen, to understand, and to work for a future where every promise is kept. His voice, gentle yet unwavering, seemed to echo off the walls lined with memories of better days, a promise that perhaps the next chapter could be different. Before the night drew to a close, he turned to the silent crowd and posed a simple question, one meant to stir the soul and ignite conversation beyond these walls. Have you ever been at a crossroads, torn between walking away and staying to listen, to truly understand? Share your story, your moment of truth. Let's open a dialogue that goes beyond headlines and politics, one that reaches deep into the heart of what it means to belong. A collective murmur of approval filled the space, a pledge that in this very moment, amidst the clatter of dishes and soft laughter, something new had begun. The manager's eyes met his once more, and with a reluctant nod he added, "Comment below, like, and subscribe if you believe that every voice matters. Because tonight, we learned that change starts when we choose to listen." And so, in that unassuming diner on a cool American night, a conversation sparked that promised to echo far beyond the confines of that modest space. A reminder that even when the world seems intent on dividing us, there is always hope in the power of dialogue, in the courage to simply sit down, share a meal, and truly hear one another. Until next time, keep the conversation alive.